unclarity with the zoning map. The applicant went ahead and was safe in terms of rezoning it just to make sure that all of that was handled. The adjacent uses are office to the east, single family residential to the west and north, single family residential and cleaners to the south. It's C3 to the east and north and R1 to the south and west. On the comprehensive plan, it indicates for strip development, which is consistent with the zoning designation that's being requested. The staff recommendation for this is approval.
Is there any public comment?
I think in the letter dated December 20th, it says approval of a replat of 3 lots into 2 lots. And I think that's just erroneous, isn't it?
This particular application is tied to a replat. It's also tied to a site plan. They're essentially redoing. It's more than a redo. It's a reconstruction of the U.S. Pizza facility, and so there's significant site improvements. And so there was some question about the southern portion of the property as to whether that was actually C3 or whether it was R1. And so that's where this particular agenda item, there'll be 2 other agenda items following with the site plan and the replat that will follow this.
So the point of this is to clarify that ultimately this will all be under one zoning classification.
And one property.
Okay. I move that this rezoning be approved.
Second.
Further discussion? Call the roll.
Middleton.
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Gillum.
Aye.
Bruno.
Aye.
The site plan for 8403 Highway 107 U.S. Pizza, Garnet Engineering, agent.
So this is the same property as before. Initially, there was concern of the 6-foot privacy fence along the north side, extending close to Highway 107. Staff commented that we wanted them to check on side distance to make sure that there was clear side distance. They have done so, and they have moved that fence back, or they not necessarily moved it back, but they noted on the plans that that fence is 25 feet from the edge of sidewalk. Staff requested that they provide easements for any utility mains that encroach on the property. They have agreed and provided 10-foot utility easements on all sides. They addressed our comment that regarding pavement materials for the parking lot. They provided striping to delineate queue areas at each driveway. They addressed our comment regarding irrigation for the landscaping. They provided the landscaping green space calculations, showing that landscaping green space calculations should not include the peripheral strips along Highway 107 or the north and south property lines. So they updated the calculations, and additional green space is not required. They were asked to indicate architectural elevations for the building and screening materials for the dumpster, which must meet city design standards. They were provided and they meet those standards. Regarding the drainage on Exhibit B on their drainage calculations, it was requested that they show the post-development flow for one of their catch basins that was addressed. And they addressed some further comments on the drainage report. And finally, and then it was noted that they must receive a Arkansas Department of Transportation driveway access permit. They have already obtained that, and that was provided to us. And then it was also noted that a City of Sherwood grading and land alteration permit and erosion control plans would be required prior to any land clearing or grading activities at the site. And they have acknowledged and provided that. And the use of this development are consistent with the C3 and commercial zoning, which corresponds to the strip development indicated on the land use plan for the property. This development should be considered consistent with the land use plan, and staff recommends this for approval.
Are there any comments from the public? Bob, get up there and give your name and address, please. And if you would, sign the sheet up there.
My name is Brenda Miller, and I live at 16 Helen Drive, which is right smack dab in the middle of the west part of this property. How much space is there going to be between our fence line and I'm hoping a retaining wall on that west line?
You're saying your property is backs up
West.
to the west of it?
Right back door, I mean smack dab next to it. It adjoins.
This is actually being constructed on the front part of it, and probably the applicant can clarify those things a little bit better in that. But the sort of the context or the scope of what's actually being developed, there's a few hundred feet between their back property line and where the development is actually
But there's
occurring.
parking spaces right on that west
You're saying to the south?
edge.
Yeah, currently that west half of that property is not going to be developed. It's going to remain vacant. It's being cleared, but there's no development going on right now.
Well, according to the plat, it looks like there is.
Yeah, the plat shows parking.
Is there not?
It's
It
parking.
shows parking.
It's
That's,
fine.
it's only
That's only the front half. Like, I don't know which exhibit you're looking at, but like the parking only goes about halfway up their property line, and then the back half is going to remain empty.
The engineer get up and address that.
What we're showing is developing all of the east half of the front part of the property towards the highway. We don't have any development at this time on the west half. So I'm a little bit confused about the wall and all that location. We do have a retaining wall, but it's about halfway in the property along the west edge of the parking lot.
do you have are you able to measure off your document that specifies the sort of the distance between the property line and where the limit of development is for this?
Well, to the west property line, or around 190, 100.
Yeah, it's right around 200 feet is what it looks like.
And the plat shows one. Hey, James.
There's about 200 feet between the back edge of that parking lot to where that property line is.
This is right.
Where we do have walls up against property line. Walls at the property. That's from the south and north. If that helps.
Did that answer your question? Is there any other comment?
Hi, my name is Aileen Jackson. I'm at 12 Helen Drive. The question is, our concern is, you're going to have the empty space from the property line to our back fences. So what's the plan for that? Just leave it vacant? Is it going to become like a dumping ground, or is there any plan for the future for that space? You see what I'm saying? It's going to be empty back there, so what's the plan for it?
Manningham?
If that's reserved for future development.
Yeah, future development.
Oh, ma'am.
Yeah.
As far as I know, the future development of that western portion is going to be stored. So it'll be there's a 25-foot setback shown on the plat.
That's not correct. We can't do that. Because I'm Don Holland. I'm the project manager for US Pizza. That's changed in your zoning requirements. You have to have C4 to do storage buildings, so we're not sure what we're gonna develop back there, but it is development. Right now, we have materials for where we tore down the other buildings that we're gonna reuse on the site, stacked in that part of the lot, and we will clean all that up and let it out. So we'll be almost 200 feet from the back of the restaurant or parking of the restaurant to your property. Go ahead.
Our backyard slightly slopes to the end.
Yes.
Is there going to be a retaining wall built down there that will hold all that?
I don't think there's enough of a slope. There hadn't been a wall there yet, and I don't think there's anything eroding. So, you know, we'll grade it out to where or put a wall if we need a wall. We'll grade it out to where the wall required.
And there's going to be how much feet on the other side?
I don't think we can develop within 25 foot of your property line ever. So we'll always.
Don't become a junkie.
James,
I think we've cleaned up most of the junk heap that was there.
And additionally, I will say this from the staff viewpoint. When that property is developed, if it is developed at that time, it will go through the site plan review process, very much the same as what this is. Be reviewed against all of the codes to ensure that there's buffering and the proper setbacks and fences definitely.
In the site plan, currently we are taking care of the watershed, that's the stormwater on that part of the lot.
Are there any other comments from the public? Commission? What's your pleasure?
And my only comment was that with all the parking and stuff they're putting on there, they're only putting 4 handicap spots in there with 1 van accessible. Personally, as being one of the person that needs those kind of things, I'd like to see more. I'm sure what they have meets code, but you know, there's nothing wrong with going in excess. No, I understand that. There's nothing wrong with going beyond.
What's your pleasure?
I move that site plan be approved.
Second.
Call roll.
Middleton.
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Gillum.
Aye.
Bruno.
Aye.
Zoning for 816 East Kill Avenue from C3 to C3 conditional, MPY Farmland LLC owner.
Comments?
Yes, this conditional use permit is to operate an auto repair shop. The current use is warehouse, office, and retail. It's adjacent to a flea market to the east, a church to the north, single-family homes to the south, and an office to the west. It's C3 to the west and the east, and R1 to the south, and C1 to the north. The plan indicates for this property be strip development and single-family detached. The site is an existing 2.4 acre site. The site has a strip center it's accommodated numerous uses over time. The property has over a 600-foot depth along its Kill Avenue frontage, which is pretty extensive. Some of the things that staff noted is that the use would be more intense than most nearby uses. Full development of the entire 2.4 acres could potentially present harm to the residential property to the south, which that property to the south is a 6.5 acre tract that could be re-subdivided in the future. Most likely it's based on market conditions. The potential negative effects of the proposed use and zoning could be mitigated by maintaining a buffer between the R1 zoning to the south and this site. Some of the things that staff asked for was a landscape plan to indicate buffering of the use of the site with the recommendation that a provision of a substantial buffer to the property to the south Staff asked for a generalized site plan that indicated parking areas and storage areas. We additionally asked if any proposed or future structures indicate any proposed or future structures or storage areas, particularly as it relates to where vehicles might be stored with that. We asked if the existing structure would be renovated. Are there plans to update that to the architectural appearance to meet architectural requirements? Additionally, asked how many repair bays would be planned with that. The zoning code limits storage to one vehicle per bay for after-hour storage to be placed in an area behind a 6-foot opaque fence. So, based on all of those things, staff at this point did not have enough information to provide a recommendation because there are a lot of outstanding questions. Additionally, with the potential of where that activity might be occurring on the site, if there's not buffering to the property to the south, there was some concern over how that would impact that's R1 property to the south. So based on that, staff does not have a recommendation with this particular application.
Was the applicant approached with these questions?
I think the applicant was provided the report.
And have any answers to the questions to this point?
No.
I went over and looked at the site, and Keel Avenue is about 30 or 40 feet in elevation higher than the next street. I've forgotten the name. But anyway, and the area behind the existing building has been filled with concrete rubble and stuff, and it's pretty messy. And the only way I would agree to this would be that a buffer of at least 100 feet from the south line forward, that it remain untouched. There's a few trees down there. There is a residence down on the property line. I think this situation we've got, a lot of the land behind the commercial business on the south side of Keel has a lot of junk cars and stuff that are just hiding back there. And it really needs to be cleaned up. Of course, the other thing is if I think this property was over 600 feet long. It was an eighth of a mile. And if we don't use it for this, what are we going to use it for? I mean, it's not good for much of anything. And I'm kind of reluctant. And the main thing would depend on where the building is put, and we need some, well, like you say, overnight parking. Already we have zoning for that. But it's not beautiful now, I'll tell you.
No. I think there needs to be a stipulation that there's no outside storage of junk vehicles. So
absolutely.
Even within that buffer zone. Do we know if they're going to use inside or outside repair bays?
We haven't gotten any clarifications from the questions.
That makes all the difference in the noise and the mess. If they're inside, it's more like your Sears Service Center that's up there on the inside bays.
Staff essentially didn't, having not gotten information back, staff didn't have enough information to say, recommend a set of conditions that might mitigate some of the issues.
With all the outstanding questions, when we move to table it, I move to table it.
Second.
Oh.
Middleton?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye.
Gillum?
Aye.
Bruno?
I don't get an opportunity to speak. That's my property.
Okay.
I think a lot of it's misunderstood.
Good to sign in, please.
My name's Danny Barker. I live at 1641 Oak Shadows Drive, North Little Rock. I've owned that property since, my partners and I have owned it since 2008, April. We bought it from Bush Ramsey. At the time we bought that property, this particular unit that I'm wanting a condition for was being used as it's called Sherwood Performance. And a guy named Randy Westmoreland was leasing that building. That unit number 8 that we're talking about that I'm wanting condition for, was being used as a automobile repair shop. And it was, he worked on drag cars. All the repairs were being done on the inside of the unit. So I'm a little perplexed as to why the city will not grant the gentleman that has leased the building from me to have a foreign car repair shop. And I was hearing about the feel and everything like that. That's been like that since Mr. Ramsey developed that.
Are you saying that there's going to be no new construction?
No, sir. It's an existing building. It's unit number 8. Should have everything there that we sent in. It's unit number 8. And all he's wanting to do, he'll do foreign car repair, and he'll do all of it inside the base. There will not be a bunch of cars sitting outside, or anything of that nature. Mr. Westmoreland was working on drag cars, which is totally different, and had been there when I bought the property. Ramsey had leased the building to him then.
Is unit number 8 an existing garage or shop of some kind?
Yes, sir. There's 4 retail spaces in the front. There's a healthcare center in the front, which is about 2,100 square feet. And Richard Day, State Farm agent, he's next door to there. And then there's a church, Rising Star Baptist Church, and they have 2 units there. They have unit number 4, which is their sanctuary, and then they have unit number 3, which is the fellowship hall. And they've been there ever since I purchased the property. And then on the back side of the property is office warehouse space. Tom Brooks has a building back there that he's had for years. Actually, he was in unit number 8 for some time, and then he moved to a smaller unit. Yes, sir. It's one building, but it has 8 units in it, and the front units are office retail space, and the back units are office warehouse space.
The reason I ask that is you're only asking for conditional use for one bay. Does it not need to be conditionally changed to zoning for the entire building?
Well, that's not what I was asking for. I was just asking for this one unit so he can get a business license to operate. He signed a lease with me in October, and I suspended his lease until we get this matter resolved. So he's already got equipment in there that he's installed. He's had a licensed electrician go in and do the wiring he needed for his equipment, and he's not been able to generate any income out of the unit, and so I've suspended his payments until we get this matter resolved. So I've lost three months worth of payments, which would be November, December, and this month.
Which suite would he be in?
Sir?
Which suite would he be in?
Number 8.
Number 8. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So he's gonna use that essentially as a one-bay shop?
Yes, sir.
I had misunderstood. I thought you were going to build a new building.
No, sir. No, sir.
And there's no.
We don't have any.
It's a square.
Want to develop that back there.
Was this considered a non-conforming pre-existing use? I mean, if it was previously used for repairs of some kind.
Do we need to detable this some?
I'm thinking so.
Well, you could take another vote. First, is there going to be any kind of storage of vehicles outside of that shop?
No, sir.
But hazmat. What hazardous materials?
No, sir.
Well, you can vote to untable this and approve or approve conditionally. But before we do that, staff, any other comments based on what you just heard?
I would still probably tie maintaining a buffer on the property, a 100-foot buffer on the property on the south, with the second stipulation of no storage of vehicles outside of the structure.
So when you talk about a buffer, are we talking about a fence or a wall?
Just leaving it undisturbed.
Okay, so 100 feet back from the back of the building.
No, I'm from your back property line,
Okay.
from the south property
Okay.
line.
One more, don't we already have a city ordinance concerning parking of vehicles overnight at garages?
The zoning code limits storage to one vehicle per bay. After hours storage to be placed in an area behind a 6-foot opaque fence. That's what the zoning code requires. If we have the stipulation of no storage vehicles outside, that goes a little bit beyond what the requirement of the storage of vehicles outside behind a fence. So we don't have plans that indicate an opaque fence or anything like that. I think and since they're only going to be repairing one vehicle at a time, having the no storage of vehicles outside doesn't require them to make any improvements on the site with any fencing, and meets all of essentially what we're wanting to achieve.
So you're suggesting two conditions to the conditional use?
Yes.
100-foot buffer and no storage vehicles.
Correct.
Sounds good.
Have
Do we need a motion to reconsider? I move we reconsider this.
Second.
Middleton,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Gillum,
Aye.
Bruno.
Aye.
Now I assume we need a motion to approve. Or
Unit specific, I think.
Agreed.
Just that one unit,
Right.
not the whole building, just that one unit.
That's what I'm saying, because that's
Yes,
not
sir.
what it says. We want to, you understand?
yes. So
Make a motion to approve for unit number 8
with conditions?
with condition.
Middleton,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Gillum,
Aye.
Bruno.
Aye.
Yes.
Good to go.
Thank you, gentlemen, I appreciate it.
This will be on the agenda for city council.
Beg your pardon?
This item will be on the agenda for city council. I believe that's the 22nd.
That's your next
All the
server.
zones have to be, approved by, that'll be the 22nd.
Thank you.
Need a replat?
A replat for 8403 Highway 107 US Pizza, Garnet Engineering Agent.
Staff comments?
So this is the same US Pizza that was discussed before. Staff comments, we ask that they dedicate 50 feet of right-of-way from the roadway center line or provide a written request to waive dedication requirements or dedicate less right-of-way. 40 feet of right-of-way was provided. They requested a waiver. Staff supports a waiver request. They were asked to provide easements for any utility mains that encroach on the property. I think this was already covered, and that was addressed. They were asked to provide certificates required in section 4.3 of the Sherwood subdivision code. They needed to provide the certificate of owner, certificate of recording, certificate of engineering accuracy, certificate of final plat approval, certificate of land surveying accuracy, and those were addressed. So staff recommends for approval with waivers, that waiver being the waiver of right-of-way dedication requirements on Highway 107, dedicating 40 feet from center line instead of 50 feet from the center line.
Comments?
The plat that's in the book has the right-of-way line of Highway 107 inside the property line. Now, does that 40-foot meet what y'all call out as right-of-way from AHTD Project 6976? Just want to make sure we're not platting a piece of property with a property line that is in conflict with what appears to be right of way that was purchased by the highway department in the past.
I'm trying to make sure I understand.
You can come look if you want to come look at what I'm looking at. Make sure. Yes. Sure. Yeah. Come on. You referenced state right of way from project 6976. That leader, even though it's cut off, the line right there, which is also a line right there.
Right.
That is.
So
inside.
I think that drawing's a little outdated.
Okay.
But what we're doing is this line on the inside is this dark line.
Okay.
We're dedicating extra.
Okay. All right. I'll make sure.
That answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Any other comments?
Make a motion to approve the plat.
With the waiver?
We'll second.
Yeah, with waiver.
Middleton.
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Gillum.
Aye.
Bruno.
Aye.
Planned unit development.
James?
I had introduced this to you all last month, and I hope you all have had some opportunities to review it. There's still some ongoing questions pertaining to procedure. So really, I wanted to get a sense of, in terms of looking at this, are you all comfortable with what the requirements are? So there's the element of the requirements, and then there's the element of procedure. Would y'all want me to walk through the elements, the sort of the requirements real quickly? So we'd be adding a couple definitions, one being common usable open space and another being floor area ratio. Floor area ratio relates to the density, the sort of the building, pertaining to, let's say if you have a two-story building, then it's measuring the ratio of the floor space of that building to the overall floor space, or the area of the lot. So you might have a ratio of 1-to-1 when you have a really tall building on a lot. Whereas with the normal structure, the ratio is going to be less. So the idea behind that. This would replace the existing PCD and PRD regulations, and would then become known as PUDs. The minimum size criteria, minimum size and use criteria, the first being is that the PUDs could be residential, they could be commercial, they could be industrial, they could be mixed use. That's one of the existing real problems with the PCD and PRD, is that it's very much based in sort of a 1980s mentality of segregation of uses. With development these days, there's more interest in mixing uses, mixing different types of density. So this allows for that to actually be able to be done.
Zoning classification that'd be a possibility. Like I think it's limited down to C1 and C2.
You're saying we're a PCD?
with, well, if I'm understanding correctly, right now, if you put a C3 would not work under our current scenario. I think C1 or C2.
You couldn't do, what he's asking is you can't do a PCD except in C1 and C2 as it written right now.
This basically, that idea of the way that works would go away.
My understanding is that it still has to be permitted by the underlying zone,
Yeah.
whatever that is.
So the other the thing that would additionally be a threshold requirement is the minimum size for a PUD that would incorporate residential and mixed uses would have to be at least 3 acres. One of the reasons for that is sometimes developers will try to take a 1 acre lot and cram in several houses, and we want a PUD residential to at least be substantial enough to net more than that. At least not try to prevent those sorts of things. For one that's commercial and industrial, that would be the minimum size would be 1 acre. So we reduced the requirement there. With the uses permitted, so the idea is that they were previously would be allowed only in certain zones. It has a requirement here for uses permitted. The uses in the PUD would have to either A, be consistent with the land use plan that's indicated for that area. So if the underlying zone is, let's say, R3, and on the plan it indicates for some type of commercial, then they might be able to do commercial within there. It would have to be permitted in the underlying zoning district. So that's another criteria that it could be, or be substantially similar to an adjacent use. And those are the sort of the threshold standards that you would have to get in the door to even be reviewed.
If I'm understanding that right, then they'd either have to amend the land use plan to make it consistent, which would probably require amending the zoning too.
Correct. Yeah. The requirement for development density, all the developments would have to clearly depict what the proposed density by land use category. Non-residential density would be expressed as floor area ratio so that you get an idea of the actual intensity of the development. There's a calculation for residential density that essentially takes the number of housing units and divides it by the developable land plus the common usable open space to get residential density. The idea behind this is that in structuring it that way, it allows for cluster development if that cluster development is setting aside a substantial amount of property. So you could reduce, let's say you could reduce the actual lot size to 3,000 square feet, provided that that's being offset by a great deal of additional off space. So it achieves this idea of cluster type development, which has become pretty popular. Those densities are limited for single family to 7 dwelling units per acre. That's exclusive of drainage areas. That's also exclusive of roadways. Duplex is 9 dwelling units. Townhouses would be 11. Multifamily, if it's 1 to 2 stories, would be 18. And then multifamily 3 stories or more would be 24 dwelling units per acre. So it's setting some parameters for you can't just go crazy with the density of the development. Setbacks would be defined by the development. The lot size and area requirements would be sort of defined within those parameters of what the allowable density would be. There is not a minimum requirement, though. It would just be based on what the overall density of the development. There's requirement for open space reservation. One of the concerns last month was why did we have a range from between 10 and 15% for residential? Increase that to 15% for the total development area would be common usable open space. So there would be a minimum if there's a 1 acre or 3 acres that's being developed, then 15% of that would have to be set aside for common usable open space. The idea behind that is setting that requirement requires the developer to have some sort of amenity that's associated with the development. So again, it's getting at this intent of not allowing the PUD process to be abused to where it's just packing in a lot of units into one place without creating any kind of amenity for the development.
Doing it that way, would that, just for future maintenance would require an HOA?
I'll get to that. And if there's common usable open space that's future phase construction, then they would have to provide a bond for that or some sort of financial instrument or commitment. One of the things we wouldn't want to have happen is they come in, they build 6 houses, and they say, well, the next phase is going to have the park and all of those things, and then they never come back. And so we want to have them to have some sort of financial commitment on the table that requires them to come back to build that if it's in a future phase. For a sidewalk system, it allows development of an alternative sidewalk system. So if, let's say that they weren't necessarily going to provide, maybe they were going to provide sidewalks on one side instead of both sides, but they were going to have some sort of perimeter walk, there's flexibility to allow something of that type. They would have to provide landscaping that would meet the minimum intent of what the zoning code requires. There is a requirement here for a bill of assurance, covenant, a trust, or some sort of type of home ownership, homeowner association that would be tasked with maintenance. That POA HOA could not be dissolved. It would have to be established before building permits were granted. The membership and fees would be mandatory for anybody that lives in there, and that would be assigned in perpetuity. They would have to be able to increase what their POA dues are. So let's say that when it's established, the dues are $300 per year. They would have to be able to legally increase that to $350 or whatever as inflation to provide for the maintenance. With that, and it would also establish that they would have to have liability for liens. So if they didn't pay their HOA dues, you'd have a lien on your property, so that would be collected once the property was sold. Responsibility for the open space would be, there wouldn't be anything that would require the city to assume responsibility of any open space. If a private street were constructed within one of these developments, the street would have to be brought up to city standards before it could be dedicated, which is something that they need to be aware of. And then it does not relieve the developer of any of the existing subdivision requirements. So those additionally would apply. The remainder of this really relates to the procedural things, which are the two-step process, which sort of that two-step process allows first for sort of a concept plan, a zoning plan to be developed, and then second for the actual engineered drawing. So the idea is allowing a developer to maybe come in with an idea that is somewhat creative without having to spend a great deal of money and risk that's associated with it. If we approve the zoning plan, then they come back, they can actually go then and develop the engineered drawings that cost so much money. So it's meant to be an incentive for creative types of development.
Is this strictly residential?
It would relate to commercial developments. It could relate to mixed use developments. It could relate to industrial developments. Okay. So it's sort of one catch-all. Rather than approaching it from a planned residential development, a PCD development, a PID development that you have in some places, it's basically one zoning category that captures all of it.
Question on the procedures, which I had a number of questions there, but I'll summarize them quickly. There's a requirement that the planning commission must allow a public hearing if a deferral is requested during that. Do we want it to be required or optional?
I would say, generally speaking, one of the reasons why I place that in there is that one of the things that developers do from time to time is they will ask for an item to be tabled, particularly it's something like this that's very contentious, with the idea that well, if we get it tabled for 30, 60 days, things are going to die down. These people will go away and they won't come back. So the requirement for that public hearing to be continued then allows those voices essentially to be reheard again. So it incents the developer not to try to use that trick to get something through.
Okay, another question is that the planning commission is required to make a decision within 30 days of the public hearing. If this is a complex project, is 30 days enough?
I would agree with you.
It's to be continued to the next meeting.
Yeah. I think all of the questions that you had emailed, I agree with pretty much all of them.
I had a few.
Well, good.
I've got one. On section regarding number 9, insurance covenants, price, I have a concern about, and it's not me personally, it's the city attorney, but whoever the city attorney is, tasked with approving all legal entities, city court planner, permit care maintenance, and legal form of effect. I have a concern that may create somewhat of a conflict. If I'm technically sprinkling holy water on what they've already hired a lawyer to write and do for them, then I think that gives the developer perhaps more cover if there's an issue between the homeowners and the property owners. Wait, the city's already looked at this, they've approved it. I don't think we want that.
Would it be better if it was, say, reviewed?
That'd be
Okay. That was the intent. It's just that they didn't come in, slap something down, and then.
I'm fine with reviewing it, and I like what the rest of the paragraph says about the planning commission having the authority to do that. I think it's very important. That's just something you have to have.
You all have any other comments or questions?
Covered most.
Okay.
I'm Doris Anderson. I live at 2507 Bearskin Drive in Sherwood. And I have concerns that this document has not been prepared in sufficient time for consideration by this planning commission. I requested the documents regarding this after the last planning commission on December the 13th. It was not provided to me. I requested it again twice in January. I finally received this documentation on January 4th, which is only 5 days ago. So I don't think that y'all had the documents sufficient time to really review it, and the public certainly has not had any access to this.
Well, the commission can't consider this until we hold a public hearing on it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I would also like to ask if there's a way that these documents like this could be placed with the agenda, along with the agenda on the city's website, so the public can review them. These are significant changes to city zoning, and people they really want to be made aware and have a good understanding of this. And ask for the homeowners association or whatever type of entity you want to provide for continuation of special improvements on this. That would require a special improvement district that could be declared at the county collector's or county assessor's office. They could collect those dues or fees along with the taxes on the property, and that entity can never go away. If it is a special improvement district, that gives them taxing authority and continuity as far as keeping that particular entity alive forever. Randy Wiggins had to do a special improvement district for Austin Gardens patio homes, and he's continued that, and that will live forever. So I don't think a homeowners association or some entity like that would be the responsible party. I think it really ought to be a special improvement district so that those fees can be assessed and stay with the property regardless of the sale or ownership.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next step is, if you're comfortable with the basic of this draft is to schedule a public hearing on a revised draft that James will work on. Hopefully you can get it to us early enough that we can really think about it beforehand, or we can come back to this again next month and review what he's written before we go to public hearing.
I think we should do that.
Okay. It is so ordered. James, updating planning document?
Yes, you all should additionally have some information here on sort of a plan and codes update approach. One of the things that we've had some discussions on over the last few months relates to getting the master street plan, the land use plan, all of those things updated. And so done some thinking in terms of a reasonable approach in terms of tackling that and looking at how we would go about that. And so really what this entails is updating the land use plan, master street plan, really shifting it more maybe away from just being those two separate documents to something that might be the Sherwood Vision Plan, or maybe something that might be called the Sherwood General Plan. Not necessarily sure I'd call it the comprehensive plan, but something along those lines. One of the first tasks that would be required of that is creating or updating the planning area boundary, which we've already accomplished. The next step in this would be establishing a steering committee. And the idea behind a steering committee would be that you'd have individuals from the planning commission, you'd have individuals from the city council, individuals from the community, so that it sort of represented a cross section of the community in terms of putting this together. The idea is with the vision plan is to sort of establish an overall vision for the community that establishes sort of a set of goals and policies that represents the idea of in 2040 what Sherwood wants to be. That's essentially the idea behind it. We would do some community-wide engagement, holding a community-wide charrette, which is basically a fancy word for a workshop where we would invite the community and make a very strong effort to get as many folks involved as possible in terms of having that. And it would be a sort of this, we have folks sit down around tables in groups of 8 to 10. And it would be focused around them creating a vision, and out of that we get an idea of prioritizing what people view as being sort of the main priorities for the community, identifying what are some key issues that need to be addressed, and simply the fun idea, or it's more than that, just the ability to tap into a lot of different individuals' brains and get new and fresh ideas. That's always just, for me, it's fun. But I think it's also very, very important to get a lot of different ideas from different folks. We would have an input website that would provide an extended opportunity for the community to provide input. It would basically be sherwood.planyourcity.com if we were to set that up. We could potentially, if this is something that's desired, we could have stakeholder group interviews or individual interviews. Some examples of that might be with residents, that might be with business leaders, economic developers, recreation advocates. One of the things that I think is particularly powerful is doing some engagement with students. In plans that I've worked with in other communities, it's interesting. Some of the best comments, the most salient comments about the future of the community have come from kids.
They're the most honest.
They're definitely the most honest.
They're going to inherit whatever we do.
Yes. And I mean, if you really want to plan for the future, then you need to think about what it is that they actually want. So one of the ways that we can do that is kind of use the schools to create some packets, and then actually allow teachers to kind of helping develop some level of curriculum that then goes out to a lot of the students. And then we get that input back and put it in. And so that's something that can be really powerful, that helps create a lot of community buy-in. Others might be underrepresented groups or development professionals. So those are some ideas of that's certainly not an exhaustive list. There could be others that we could think about. After that community sort of input, all of that community outreach, we would then sort of generate this idea of a community vision and goals that would establish sort of an overall consensus community vision. Really would be a concise framework for what we want Sherwood to be 2040.
Overlying master.
Huh?
An overlying master plan.
Yes, sort of an overlying vision. That, and then again, that would be presented back to the public. We would go through sort of a process with that. Coming out of that, that would give us an overall idea of the direction that the community needs to move, the things that we need to look at, the things that we need to address. Then we would make some updates to the land use plan, some general updates to correct mapping. There's some things that are wrong with the mapping as it stands, and then determine some areas that need special study. So the ones that we already know need special study, but going through that process and thinking about, okay, we need to take a deeper dive in these particular areas. There's some areas of the community that are not going to change. I would be highly surprised if the community wanted them to change. And so with those, maybe it's a single family neighborhood, and maybe that's what we want it to continue to be, and that's what it's always going to be. So we would do that. There would be, and so with that, we would conduct some sub area or corridor plans. Some ideas might be Highway 107, Brockington, Keel. Some of these areas where we really know either we want another shot at developing those areas, redeveloping those areas, or as those parts of the community develop, we really want to make sure we do it right. We don't want to create problems in the future. Then we'd have updates to the master street plan, where we could work in coordination with MetroPlan to update some of those routing locations, update the cross sections. The cross sections that exist in the subdivision regulations are pretty outdated and need some revision. One of the reasons that staff supported the request for a waiver of the right-of-way dedication requirements on the replat was because the existing right-of-way dedication requirements are unrealistic. You would not want a 100-foot right-of-way for 107. And then coming out of that, we would address the sort of the problems in the zoning code and subdivision code and update those things over time. And that little picture is sort of an example of sort of the story map type of website that we might do. So if this is something that y'all think is a good idea, that generally you say, yeah, let's move forward with this, then I'll take this to the council and present this idea, and then we'll kind of start boogieing full tilt on it.
I like the process. Back in the old days, you had a landscape architect who'd come in, draw pretty drawings of the city that nobody paid any attention to thereafter. And the charrettes that I have participated in have been truly meaningful, because and it's a lot of work to make those happen, because you have to pull people in who'd rather watch reality TV or their phones. But when you get them around the table trying to decide what they want the community to look like, two things happen. One, it's amazing how much in common these different groups all come together, and it's amazing the ideas they come up with. Yes, ma'am.
My name's Leslie Durbin, and I live at 6700 Austin Harbor Loop. I'm also a teacher at Sylvan Hills High School. So we have East, and they're supposed to be part of community involvement. That would be awesome. Our kids are always coming to us teachers, even the ones that are not over East, stating what they want Sherwood to be like. I can tell you one of the main things is they don't want all the trees cut down. Okay, that's coming from teenagers that are stuck in their phones all the time. So that makes me, I'm a science teacher, very happy. Also, I've been doing some behind the scenes very similar to what you're proposing, which I like. There are some areas where the kids are wanting, and I even asked them as well as neighbors and other people about certain property that really, you know, it's a contentious piece of property of what goes in there. And I have sat around, thought about it, and I came up with an idea. I've talked to my students, I've talked to neighbors. Some of my students live in Parkcrest Apartments. They're good kids, okay? It's just circumstances why they're living there. I even talked to them about it because it would affect them, and they love the idea. It's something that I think would be a great PR thing for Sherwood, and I would love something like that because I think if we put everybody's minds together, we can, instead of just developers coming in saying, we want to put this here and here and here. We live here. We know what we want our city to look like. We want it to be beautiful. We want it to be user-friendly, walking, biking friendly. So please get with me, Leslie Durbin, Sylvan Hills High School. You can find me very easily. So, but yes, I think that's an awesome idea, and I'm very happy here.
Do you ever encourage your students to come to planning commission meetings? Or
Yes.
city council meetings?
Yes. In fact, we just honored a whole bunch of our National Honor Society students, which I'm co-chair of. They get out and work in the community. They're very community oriented. Very community oriented. So yes, they do come to meetings. They, I'm leaving this meeting, going to another meeting. But yes, they know what I'm involved in and what I do, and I encourage them to get involved. So yes.
East is a terrific program.
It is.
Thank you for coming.
Yes. And they coordinate with the science department because, well, they kind of fed I don't know, it was raccoons or what, one night with little baby. They didn't know how to build a chicken coop. Anyway, it was sad. It broke my heart when I saw the blood the next morning. I went, what happened here? But anyway, but they're learning and they're good kids. But now they know when it comes to livestock to please come see the science teachers. But yeah, it's really good. But we have the construction going on, so they're learning even about community involvement and what some of the things that we're having to give up. And it's for short term, but for a wonderful school. We even have our graduates. I just want to say, our graduates from Sylvan Hills High School come back and they're very involved in the community. We've had them at ball games. We're going to have them. They're already involved looking at the new school being built. They're very involved in what happens to Sherwood. Even though they're graduated. I cannot say that about the school that I went to and graduated from in Central Arkansas. So I'm very proud of them, and they're coming back. Well, I went to McClellan. I tell my kids I'm from the hood.
Yeah, we won't hold it against you. So.
No, it wasn't because I was just a few years after that. But thank you for that. I think it's an awesome idea. The kids want to be involved. Students, teachers, yes, we want to be involved. So, and residents, we really would like to put input.
Thank
but
you.
I know the owner of a piece of land I really want to talk to you about.
Gentlemen, do you want to have James approach the council?
Yes, let's move forward. That's my opinion.
Is there any old business? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Middleton?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye.
Gillum?
Aye.
Bruno?
At this time, we will convene the Board of Adjustment.
Oh yeah, you gotta play chairman right now.
Yeah.
Okay. I forget. I gotta do this again.
Madam Secretary, would you call the roll, please?
Middleton?
Here.
Martin?
Here.
Gillum?
Aye.
Bruno?
Here. Next order of business is the approval of the minutes of the previous Board of Adjustment. Has everyone had a chance to read them? And if so, do we have a motion, comments, or corrections?
Move we approve.
Second.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, would you call the roll, please?
Middleton?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye.
Gillum?
Aye.
Bruno?
Aye.
The next order of business, item 4, is the election of a new chairman for the Board of Adjustment. At this time, I will take nominations for a new chairman.
Nominate Mr. Middleton.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Madam Secretary, we have a motion and a second for nominating Mr. Middleton as the new chairman of the Board of Adjustment. Would you call a roll, please?
Middleton,
Sure.
Martin,
Aye.
Gillum,
Aye.
Bruno.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, your floor.
Okay. Variance request.
Variance request of
Hang on.
9,
1 second. Bylaws say you gotta do a vice chairman of this one too.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's right.
Is there
I'll second
nominations
that,
for vice chairman?
I'll second your motion for him. You pointed, it's close enough.
Let the record reflect that Blake Martin was nominated.
Mr. Attorney, thank you.
Middleton,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Gillum,
Aye.
Bruno.
Aye.
You have the disclaimer that
Sure do, right
It's-
here.
It's in all of our books, actually.
Oh, have you got one of these?
Yeah. That, yeah. You got it. There you go. That's your turn to read that.
Swear in the city engineer. Which one?
we're in.
Whoever's going to
Swear
be
to tell the
testifying
truth,
is actually the.
not the truth.
I do.
Yes. Okay. Agenda.
A variance request of 9 feet to the required 25-foot front yard setback along East Woodruff for a fence at 9,000 East Woodruff. Drew Keithley with Keithley Construction, owner.
If staff comments on this, please, first.
Yes. In reviewing this particular application, staff found out that such applications actually do not specifically require a variance approval. It actually requires Board of Adjustment approval. The language is section 942. Any fences or screens constructed must not extend beyond the front building line on any lot, nor beyond the side building line on corner lots. Said fences or screens shall have Board of Adjustment approval as to location, height, and material, and construction. So the application was made as a variance. I recommend considering this as a Board of Adjustment item, as an approval item rather than a variance, in terms of looking at it. The reason this is being asked for is the lot is very oddly shaped. It's a very strange shape, and it's very difficult to sort of create the privacy of a backyard as a result of that. And that has been stated by the applicant. The applicant's intent is to put in a swing set and a pool in the private yard behind the street screening. This fencing, which if you have driven by there, is already constructed, projects 9 feet into the required front setback. So it's set 16 feet back from the right of way. Some conditions on the lot rises 10 feet from the street to the back edge of the property, which does create some necessity for having a privacy fence to impede visibility into the yard. The proposed fence actually would set back from the adjoining fence, which is to the east. So there's a fence at 2733 Whitewood that's located along the right of way. This would actually set back further than that. Some of the questions that we had were, what would the fence be constructed out of? Now that it's constructed, we do know. As a result of that, staff did have some questions in terms of would they be willing to consider landscaping outside the fence to break up some of the sort of the aesthetic of having that fence line there. Did note that the visibility wouldn't impede visibility of cars in that particular location based on where it's located. It would be outside of the site triangle. And then That's really largely what our questions were pertaining to that.
Just wanted to be clear on something. You are saying that the fence does not have to be set back 25 feet from the right of way.
The zoning requirement is that it has to be placed at the front setback line unless the Board of Adjustment says that it's can be. So it doesn't require a variance.
How is that not a variance?
It does not stipulate that it would be a variance. It just says Board of Adjustment approval. Much in the similar way that when in certain zoning codes you'll notice where it says remodeling of the structure requires approval of the Board of Adjustment. So. 942, it says any fences or screens constructed must not extend beyond the front building line on any lot, nor beyond the side building line on quarter lots. Said fences or screens shall have Board of Adjustments approval as to location, height, material, and construction.
But what they're asking for is where the fence is constructed right now, correct?
But basically, what you're arguing is that because the Board of Adjustment approves location, that's not a variance.
In essence, yeah, it's not going through the variance procedure. It's the standard of review that relates to it.
That may be one that needs to be cleaned up. To be clearer.
Yeah.
Your recommendation is that this is not a variance.
The recommendation is that it not be reviewed as a variance.
Is that your opinion, Mr. Cobb?
Section is decided, I mean, that's what it says. I hadn't considered that until just now. And, but it is an application for a variance. And if they granted the variance, it would accomplish the same thing.
It would.
You did say that it was the odd lot that had a unique feature.
The lot is oddly shaped, and there's some considerations relating to elevation. That being said, if the fence were placed at the building setback line, I'm not sure that those conditions couldn't easily be met if it was just placed 6-9 feet further back.
My memory is fading, but is that fence set further back than the fence to the east?
Yes.
Yes.
The fence to the east is out at the right of way line.
Oh, we have to consider location, materials, and yes, it's already built. Basically, they're asking for a rubber stamp. Yeah, culpa.
We need to see if there's any audience who would object to.
Are there any comments or questions from the audience?
Keep the construction, and I apologize, I didn't understand about the variance in that section. I didn't know what I was asking for, but I am the applicant. And as you stated, go ahead.
Okay, but do you promise to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Absolutely.
I just wanted to know if he was here. I didn't know if he had anything you wanted to address.
Basically, with the lot we purchased, obviously a poor lot, it was a leftover lot, but wanted to take that lot and build a nice house on it, which we did, I feel like, but it was a very irregular shape. Once we built the fence, realized that the way we had to situate the house on the lot, there was almost zero backyard. However, there was a large side yard space. So basically requesting that the fence be 9 feet from the standard building line, which as pointed out, it still remains approximately more than 10 feet behind the adjoining fence to the east side. As far as being an eyesore or anything of that nature, My perspective, it wouldn't be because it does set behind.
So the action of this board is to whether you choose to approve the location, height, material, and construction of a fence that's already been built or deny it.
I would go on to state the building of the fence was not done intentionally. That was a mistake, not realizing where the actual pin was. Once the fence posts were concrete and set, at that point it was pointed out the fence may be not exactly where it should have been. And after looking at it, that was correct. So that is the reason for the request at this time and how it all came.
But and you're saying you realized it when the posts were set and then continued on and completed the fence?
We did complete the fence. There was some communication there, some miscommunication there. At the end, it was an eyesore with the fence not being completed, partially completed. We go ahead and complete the fence.
At your risk of us saying no and you having to remove it all.
I understand the risk there, and if we have to remove the fence, then we'll definitely understand that. It was honestly not something trying to be deceptive in any way, shape, or form. It was something after we had set the post and started the fence, realized that it wasn't.
I just don't like being in this position of signing off on something after, like asking permission after they've already done something.
I noticed there was a truck parked behind the fence. Is that truck on a concrete pad or is it just on the grass?
There is no concrete pad there at that time. To my knowledge, there is not a concrete pad. I'm not sure why a truck would be parked behind the fence because that is now a backyard space. Also, landscape was mentioned. That's something that we're more than willing to add some landscaping that needs to be done. Some felt that it was an eyesore. But as far as the vehicle parked behind in the grass, to my knowledge, if there was a vehicle back there, that was temporary and would not be parked for long term.
So it says you're the owner of the house. I mean, your construction company, have you sold it? Is it?
I should actually point out the house has since been sold and there is a homeowner now occupying the property.
So what's your pleasure?
I'm along with him on that. I've fallen into this before where, believe it or not, a house was constructed a little bit over a line. We had the choice of we make.
I guess the secondary question is, if this had come in fresh, could you have approved it?
That's my only saving grace. If this was been asked before you'd have done it, I'd have said yes then. Yes, Mr. Andy.
That's what I
just want to set the record straight. This is the building permit application for the fence, and they had set the post, and that's when we were able to determine that a fence was going up.
Right.
And I'm the one who brought it to Mr. Keatley's attention that he would have to make an application for the fence and apply for a variance if the fence was going to be located where it was. Made a comment on the permit application, fence must be at or behind front building line or a variance is required. And we did request that the fence not be completed for the portion that was subject to the review by this committee. And certain of the pickets were put on the front portion of it, and we made another call and requested again those pickets be removed. And after that, the fence got completed. So that's the situation. The fence got started, the posts were up, which happens, quite often. As soon as we see posts up, especially if they're in violation, we notify people just immediately to stop to get in line with the rules. That being said, it does have some bearing also that the right of way on Woodruff is 60 foot and not the standard 50 foot. So it pushes the pin a little further behind the curve already than just the standard 3.
So is the 9 foot correct? What he's asking for, based on what you're saying of 60 foot of right of way.
I measured the corner again today just to double check it, and I would say it's, you know, it's safer to say it's between 9 and 10 feet. It measured out to be about 9.5 for me. It is well behind the fence on the corner. It doesn't create a site triangle problem, as James pointed out.
Well, and if it does, the only person it affects in the site triangle is the owner that's asking for the variance anyway.
No, it's y'all's decision. My opinion is I'd like to see it get approved. At the same time, I hope I never call a builder and tell them not to do something. They do it anyway. Because it's bad form.
Clarify something. Is the owner asking for this, or the contractor?
Asked for by myself as contractor. And just as Mr. Wilson stated, you know, I'm not trying to make excuses. I realize I have to take ownership of this, but there was a lot of miscommunication about this fence because of the pin that was just referenced. The company building the fence was measuring off the curb, not off the pin. The fence hit back further than it should have. I did ask them to cease fence where it was, and they came back and they finished it over the weekend. So I realize that's still not an excuse. I take ownership of that, but no way was I trying not to comply with Mr. Wilson.
Strikes me that if it were built at the building line, it would provide better coverage than it is now, because right now it's at a lower elevation.
Yeah, but they get more usable areas, what they're going for.
Quite a bit more.
I hate being put in a position to approve something after it's already built. But this one, in this situation, whether you come to ask my opinion before it was built, I'd still say approval. So I make the motion we approve it where it is.
I'll second it.
Call the roll.
Middleton.
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Gillum.
Aye.
Bruno.
Aye.
I think one saving grace is this other fence.
Yeah.
Is there any old business? Is there any new business? Okay.
My name is Mike Anderson. I live at 2507 Bears Kennel, Citizen Sherwood. I come to these meetings, and I know people like Andy and others, but I'm just requesting that the chairman ask people to identify themselves so that everyone in the council or in the room would know who is. And that's my only request.
Thank you. A motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.